Uh, Thank you all for joining us this evening. My name is Charotar and I'm Projects Manager at Ark. I'm delighted to welcome you to this talk by Janaki Lenin as part of our current exhibition In the Light of, curated by Gitanjali Dang, an independent writer, curator, and founder of the Arts Lab, Hanabadosh. Before I hand over the floor to Gitanjali and Janaki, I would like to take a minute to share a quick note on the gallery and our current exhibition for the new members in our audience. Gallery Ark was set up in 2017 by Seema and Atul Dalmia with the intention to platform and champion the strong heritage of arts and culture in Baroda. The gallery is currently headed by Nupur Dalmia, who has given direction to an exciting program of pedagogy and art accessibility. Through our work, we endeavor to pay homage to the Baroda stalwarts, artists like Jyoti Bhatt and K.G. Subramanian, whom we have the privilege of calling our friends and mentors, while also creating conversations around contemporary art in Baroda and beyond. In the Light of is perhaps our most ambitious exhibition yet, bringing together 25 artists and cultural practitioners in a vibrant, expansive program that includes film screenings, performances, talks such as this evening's. 2 years in the making and a pandemic in the mix. Bringing the show together was challenging to say the least, but entirely worthwhile in the end. For this, I would like to thank Gitanjali for her meticulous attention and all the participating artists for their support throughout our journey. I would also like to share that we have extended the dates for the exhibition, which will now be on view till 15th of May. And I do hope some of you can visit us in person, COVID permitting. On that note, I'm going to hand over the floor to Gitanjali to introduce Janaki and kick off the main event. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rachita. Hello, everyone. Thanks for turning up this evening. This is happening one of episode 5. And in case these terms and numbers don't make sense to you and this is the first time you're joining us, I would recommend you have a look at our exhibition website, inthelighthof.com. So today's talk by Janaki Lenin and also a whole bunch of other happenings and events that have sort of transpired over the course of a month or thereabouts are part of our exhibition In the Light of, which is currently on at Gallery Ark in Vadodara. And so I remember when Janaki and I first spoke about her being part of the exhibition, I think it was maybe a little less than a year ago. And there had just been, a little less than a year ago because it was flooding at the time in Assam. So there had just been this incident up in Assam where a tiger, in an attempt to get away from the floods, wandered out of the Kaziranga Park and spent the night, in a goat shed, which was attached to a family home in a village that's kind of just on the periphery of the park. And the family woke up to this, and of course they alerted the forest officials who turned up, but they didn't really do very much. It's just because the cat was still just, hanging out in the shed, and we have, pictures on social media to about this also. And so they just kind of closely watched the cat from a big distance, and eventually the tiger just went back into the forest with little fuss. And during the course of our conversation over the phone, of course, we wondered about such encounters. And in this case, it was, a very brief one of coexistence between wild animals and the human animal, and why some of these are more amicable than the others. And we realized through the course of the conversation that there might not be any real answers, but there was room for speculation. And so here we are. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what Janaki has to say on the subject of crocks and human encounters, and what we can learn from instances of peaceful coexistence. Before I hand over to Janaki, just some words about Janaki. A city girl gone feral, Janaki Lenin is the author of 2 volumes of My Husband and Other Animals. Her latest is Every Creature Has a Story. It's right here on my desk. I recommend everyone get a copy. It's really a wonderful read. It's something you can dip in and out of. Janaki writes on a wide range of wildlife and conservation subjects for newspapers and magazines. She and her human partner share their home on the outskirts of Chennai with their two dogs and free ranging wild creatures. Over to you, Janaki.
Thank you very much, Gitanjali and Gallery Ark, for inviting me to give this talk. I don't usually do talks, but this seemed like a wonderful opportunity, and the theme of the whole art exhibition, In the Light of, was very intriguing to me. So I spent a lot of time thinking about it and about the how appropriate it would be for locating the talk in the crocodiles of Vadodara and the neighboring regions. So my introduction to crocodiles happened about 25, 30 years ago. And it was one night that I was completely mesmerized. It was really dark, and there were hundreds of little lights that had settled on the ground. And it seemed like an entire skyload of stars had drifted to Earth. And I just couldn't take my eyes off it. Like a few lights would twinkle, some would move, and most of them just sat there and were lit up steadily. These weren't Christmas lights, they were crocodiles in an enclosure in the Madras Crocodile Bank, reptile zoo near Chennai. And these were crocodile eyes. And the reason that happens is that crocodiles are essentially creatures of the dark. They are more active at night, and they see better than us at night for that very reason. They have a special reflective layer behind the retina, and when any light that enters the eye, it gets reflected by this reflective layer back to the retina. So essentially what they're doing is double distilling an image, like they're extracting every last detail from the light that's available to them to make that image. And this is true of all nocturnal animals. If you've driven at night and if you've seen a cat or a dog crossing the road and it turns around and looks at you, you can see that the eyes reflect really brightly. And that's basically this reflective light that's reflecting the headlights back at you. And well, humans don't really have the same layer, but sometimes when you take flash photographs of people, you can see a red eye that shows up in photographs. And that's basically the light reflecting off the back of the eye, which is very rich in red blood cells. So that's why you have that red effect. So I knew all this, so I wasn't really surprised that crocodile eyes reflected light. I think what surprised me was the numbers, just this hundreds of lights looking at me. And that was just amazing because, crocodile, among all the crocodiles in the Madras Crocodile Bank, the most numerous are the mother crocodiles. Typically, other crocodiles are very possessive of their territory. They don't like to share space, and if another crocodile comes too close, then there's lots of chasing, biting, bashing. There's a lot of drama that happens, but it doesn't happen so much with mother crocodiles. So at that time, I think there were about 18 species of crocodiles and alligators and caiman at the Crock Bank, and I used to watch them every day. And you could say, okay, if you see one crocodile, you've seen them all, they all look the same. But when you see them often, then you begin to differentiate what each one looks like. And I started to appreciate them, like the saltwater crocodile, for instance, has a very sleek torpedo-like body. And the mallets crocodiles, for instance, from Mexico, they have this very attractive yellowish tinge on their flanks. And the American alligators have these very large, beautiful black eyes. So I kind of appreciated these different species. But when it came to mugger crocodiles, I always thought they were really dull and not very interesting. They were stumpy, slaty gray, nothing colorful or exciting about them until that night when I watched all these lights looking back at me. But that's that very feature that so captivated me is led to the downfall of crocodiles all over the world. How do hunters go after animals? They have to slog through forests, swamps, stalk, and ambush the animal they are trying to hunt. But hunting crocodiles is really easy. You get on a boat, you go into the middle of a water body, you sweep the water surface with a flashlight, and the crocodile eyes glow back. They just can't help it. And boom, the hunter has got the crocodile. So rivers, lakes, and estuaries, or any water body around the world they were all completely cleaned of crocodiles by hunters, and the crocodile hides were turned into handbags, wallets, and things like that. Now, mugger crocodiles are extremely adaptable animals. They are not fussy about where they live. They are not fussy about what they eat. They can even live in sewers, and they can live off rats. So the fact that they disappeared from most of their range says something about the kind of pressure they were against. So the saltwater crocodile, for instance, has an enormous range. It's all the way from the east coast of India to Australia. But mugger crocodiles are found only in this region, I think from Iran to Bangladesh and Sri Lanka in the south. And they didn't do well in any of those countries. So in the mid-1970s, the government of India and the United Nations Development Program, that's called UNDP, came up with a project called Project Crocodile. And this was meant to protect the 3 species of Indian crocodiles. They are the gharial, mugger, and the estuarine crocodile. So the reason the Crocodile Bank has so many crocodiles is because there was a government order issued by the government of Tamil Nadu demanding that the Madras Crocodile Bank breed mugger crocodiles that it could then release in reservoirs and increase their numbers. And in Tamil Nadu at that time, there's only one species, muggers, saltwater crocodiles and gharial aren't found there. So they focused on this one species. Now, reservoirs are typically controlled by the departments of irrigation, of the Public Works Department, and fisheries, and the electricity board. And none of these departments wanted to have predators to deal with. So after a few, I think they released up to 1,000 mugger crocodiles in Tamil Nadu from the Crocodile Bank. The government stopped taking crocodiles from them, but they didn't rescind the order. So the Crock Bank had a lot of mugger on its hands. Now, eventually, a few years later, they did cancel the GO, and the Crock Bank prevented reproduction by separating the male crocodiles from the female crocodiles. But before that happened, another unusual incident happened. I was standing by the enclosure of a mugger crocodile, watching her excavate her nest. Now, okay, I'm just going to share another image. So a female crocodile, a mugger crocodile, will lay about 20 to 30 eggs at a time, depending on how big she is. And these are about 3 times the size of a chicken's egg, and they are very, very hard shell, very thick calcium layer. And this female crocodile will she digs a hole in the ground, lays her eggs, and buries it. And for 2 months, she will guard it. Every evening, she'll climb up out of the water and lie on the sand, and then wait there for what seems to be a really long time. She doesn't do very much else. And in the wild, that behavior will protect her nest from all the egg predators like wild boar, pig, mongooses, and monitor lizards. But in captivity, in the Madras Crocodile Bank, she doesn't have that much to worry about, but she would anyway come up and lie on the bank on top of her nest. And I realized what she was doing when she started digging up her nest again. She was waiting to hear her babies call. But, you might have seen sea turtles lay their eggs in a similar fashion. They dig a hole in the ground and drop their eggs and bury them and go away. Now, baby sea turtles can dig their way through the sand and find their way to the ocean. But baby crocodiles don't have that kind of facility. They depend on their mothers to do that job. So she comes to the nest and kind of listens for the sounds of the babies squawking on the ground. And I was leaning over the wall and I couldn't hear it. That's how dull that sound is. So she started digging the nest, and when she uncovered it, she picked up two babies and carried them in her mouth to the water, released them, and then she climbed back up to the nest. And she would have gone on doing that back and forth, one or two crocodile babies at a time, until she had taken every last baby out of the nest and into the water. But what happened then was one male mugger who was watching the whole thing swung into action. He chased her away, and I thought, oh my God, this guy is going to eat all the eggs and he's going to eat all the babies, and that's the end of it. And I was just so horrified. I wasn't sure if I should even stick around and watch it, because my heart was really for the mother mugger crocodile. But what he did was amazing. What he did was he picked up these babies, just as the mother had, in his big toothy jaws, and carried them to the water and released them there. And it was really touching, because if you have to remember, crocodiles have one of the strongest bite forces in the world in the animal kingdom. That means they bring an enormous amount of pressure to bear when they close their jaws. So the same jaws that's crunching up like deer, or if you're in Africa, wildebeest, like enormous mammals compared to baby crocodiles, the parents can pick up their babies just so gently without crushing them. Not so different from, you've seen tigers carrying their cubs across. You see these big evil looking canine, and you just worry that it's going to puncture the babies in some way. But crocodiles are just the same way. They carry their babies in the same with the same tenderness. Later on, I read that male mugger crocodiles are among the very few crocodilian species that take their roles seriously. They actually act out the role of fatherhood. So typically, mugger crocodiles will share parental duties. So both male and females will take turns ferrying the babies out of the nest to the water and then looking after them. But in this particular case, this male took on the sole responsibility for those babies and completely absorbed the mother of all responsibility. Now you could, this is a minor aside, what was like her mental health like after she's guarded this nest for 2 months. Here is the male mother kicking her out of her job, but I'm not going to go there. It's just a thought. So the next morning when I was walking by, I leaned over the pen wall, and there was this father in the water with all these babies arranged on his head, and he looked ridiculous and cute at the same time. And he kind of stared at me with his yellow eyes, and I thought, if anyone else were to watch this, they would think I was some kind of kidnapper of baby crocodiles. But in the wild, a baby crocodile is fair game for anything that's larger than it. Like even other crocodiles could eat it, and water birds and any number of predators will be happy to feast on baby crocodiles. So it's no wonder that the father was that protective. And cleaning time was always, adrenaline pumping. So when the cleaning staff jumped into the pen to clean, the father would come rushing out with his mouth open and chase them off, or try to chase them off. But because the staff have worked there for so long, they know what to do, and they kind of deflect his attacks, and they manage to clean the enclosure before the tourists arrive. So this kind of behavior, surprised me. I thought this kind of behavior was more like mammalian, like mammals were known would more commonly look after their babies with this kind of devotion, not reptiles. But when you think about it, even mammal fathers are not that common. They are more the exception than the norm. So while I was like completely captivated by the domestic scenes and the Crock bank, in the office, we were getting all these bad news from everywhere that mugger crocodiles were grabbing people, injuring them, killing them. And there is a global database called Crock, which chronicles these encounters between crocodiles and people. And in the decade between 2007 and 2016, according to the site, there were 233 events. And in those events, about more than 100 people died. And of those 100 people, about 60 of them were killed in Gujarat. Now, that's pretty amazing, or should I say shocking figures, because if you look at all the crocodile species, you could conduct a survey and saltwater and Nile crocodiles will come up on top as the top two most feisty crocodiles in the world, and only they have killed more people or hurt more people than mugger crocodiles. You could say that mugger crocodiles were just living up to their name. After all, in English, when you say mugger, it refers to violent human beings, right? Thieves who attack you to steal from you. But actually the word is not from English, it's from Hindi, and the word comes from the word for crocodile, magarmach, and that is derived from Sanskrit, makara, which means sea monster or water monster. And I can imagine that in the mid 1800s, these colonial British officers who were out hunting were seeing these crocodiles stealthily stalk prey, or like deer or sambar or even tigers through the water and seizing their prey, and decided to use the word mugger to describe even humans. So anyway, in India, the worst hit places are Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and Uttar Pradesh. And of all of them, the worst hit is Vadodara. There is a 25-kilometer stretch of the Vishwamitri River that runs through the city. And in 2015, crocodile expert Raju Vyas counted more than 250 mugger. And the largest group of about close to 100 mugger, he spotted right in the heart of the city. Now, let me just show you what that looks like. So you could say, how are the crocodiles living in a place like that? Like I said, they can live in sewers, they can eat rats, and in a city like that, they can eat frogs and toads and rats and what else? And apparently in Vadodara, they were even scavenging off medical waste from hospitals. So it's, yeah, kind of unsavory business. And because a lot of people were getting attacked and killed, every time an incident happens, there's a lot of commotion and demands. So like, what can we do? What is to be done? And how do we get rid of the crocodiles? And at the same time, people were also being, I think, influenced by wildlife documentaries where they see these presenters running around and catching crocodiles. So I know of several instances of young people in Vadodara harassing crocodiles, and some are even hand feeding them. So whether that plays a role in creating the situation or not, we don't know for sure, but I just wanted to bring it up because it might, I think it definitely has a role to play. In any incidents of human-wildlife conflict, there are three causes that all the experts bring out. I don't know how true it is. Lack of prey, lack of space, lack of fear of humans. So if that were the case, then what can crocodiles do? Like, crocodile experts were discussing about this, and they were saying, oh, this is possibly a sign of success of crocodile conservation, that all this legal protection that came for crocodiles under Project Crocodile has increased their numbers, and now they are out attacking people. And it seemed as if crocodiles and people were side by side, you were bound to have a problem. And so in that case, then what can the solution be, short of removing all the crocodiles? In Sri Lanka, for instance, where people live along the water's edge, they have this traditional structure that they use to protect themselves from crocodiles. So they create this enclosure for themselves. The crocodiles are outside. So let me use the mouse. So that entrance to the house is there. The person comes, washes dishes or does laundry or collects water for the house, whatever, but protected from crocodiles. They don't have to be, worry about crocodiles all the time. This is more of a modern structure. This is how it was done traditionally. So could we adapt this idea for India? It could work in many places, but in reservoirs, for instance, after the monsoon, when the water is really high, you would build the enclosure up here where people can use the water. But as the summer comes, the water recedes. Sometimes it can be 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers away. And then what do you do with your fixed structure? It's up here. You can't move it as the water recedes. So it kind of didn't work in places like Neya Reservoir in Kerala, where there is a lot of conflict as well. But it could work in Vadodara, but I'm not sure why it hasn't worked. Every time I ask somebody, they say, oh, it was badly made, or substandard materials were used, or people aren't using them. So this was the kind of thought we had at the time when in 2015, I got an email from Anirudh Kumar Basava from an organization called the Voluntary Nature Conservancy in Vallabh Vidyanagar, Gujarat. He was describing this wonderful place where people and crocodiles were living next to each other with no problem at all. And this is a place called Charotar. It's about 4,000 square kilometers of fertile agricultural land, which is bound by 2 rivers, the Sabarmati and the Mahi. And the farmers here grew extensive fields of tobacco plants. And they made a lot of money. Well, I shouldn't say that. They did well. And they had irrigation canals that brought water from the rivers far inland, so they could cultivate more land all through the year. So this is the reason why it's called Charotar, and it apparently means pot of gold. Among all the people, this is like a completely agricultural landscape. There are fields, there are villages, there are ponds, there is hardly any forest or sanctuary. There are Maga crocodiles. They live in these village ponds, and they use the water channels as their highways, and they are digging their nests and on the banks, and that's where the livestock are grazing, and it's just amazing. They are raising their young, and the people aren't avoiding the use of water either. They are wading in and bathing and doing their dishes and whatever it is that they use the water for, even cultivating water chestnuts apparently. And when the pond dries up or the water level goes down and the crops can't get water on their back, they dig tunnels in the embankment so they can go inside and hang out in the coolness instead of being out in the heat. So I'm just going to show you some pictures of Charotar. Sorry, there are all these termites that are swarming. So that's an image of a crocodile, and there's water buffaloes as people, and that's another picture of that's a forest that you see in the background. That's actually a road with avenue trees on either side, although it looks like it could be a forest. And you can see the village in the background. and there are people walking back and forth, paying a second look to the crocodiles. So I thought, okay, so if people and crocodiles are living next to each other, there's going to be conflict, like I've always heard. And Anirudh also thought the same thing. So he says on his first visit to a village called Deba, he and his colleagues stood on an embankment and they were observing crocodiles. And in the far end, a group of kids were playing cricket. And the batsman hit the ball so hard that it rolled down and landed near an adult crocodile that was basking. And he watched in horror when the fielder ran to the crocodile, picked up the ball, and the game continued. So the people from the Voluntary Nature Conservancy went around to the boys and had a talk and asked, "Are you crazy? Why did you go so close to the crocodiles? You could have been hurt." And the boys looked completely puzzled, looked at each other and said, "Crocodiles are crazy. Lazy. They won't do any harm." And the other boys are nodding vigorously. And Anirudh was so perplexed that he continued chatting with them, and he realized these kids knew a lot more about crocodiles than he realized. They knew that crocodiles hang out in burrows in the summer. They knew where the burrows were, which burrows had crocodiles and which burrows didn't have. And it's not surprising because this is their playground. Sorry, I'm just running ahead of myself. So I'm going to show you I just put this picture of a crocodile digging a burrow because I didn't find one from Charotar. This is from somewhere else. But in Charotar, they look like this. The crocodile is here, and this is in a canal, and it's all overgrown with vegetation, so you can't really see it very much. And those are the kids, and you can see the crocodiles right here, not very far. And sometimes there's a crocodile on the bund as well. So the people were extremely casual about crocodiles, and Anirudh was very worried that people will get hurt if they didn't take any precautions. And after all, mugger crocodiles do have a reputation. And when I heard Anirudh's descriptions, I couldn't believe it. I didn't think it was possible for people and crocodiles to live in harmony, because the general assumption is that crocodile brains are the size of a walnut. So they at least experts said at that time that they're not capable of making a great deal of discrimination, and they are prone to reflexively attacking anything that moves in the water. And so, but from what Anirudh was saying, these crocodiles weren't behaving like that at all. They were being very selective about what they were hunting and leaving people alone. And I really wanted to see the place for myself. And a few years after Anirudh told us about this place, I had a chance to visit Charotar. At first glance, the first village I went to was called Malataj. It was just unremarkable. It looked like any other village. Everyone was around the pond, and the women were doing their dishes and chatting amongst each other. Buffaloes were soaking in the water, and nothing seemed ordinary. And then there was this log-like thing on the bank that slipped into the water, and it was a crocodile. So so here we go. Yeah, so it looks very pretty. So as I was watching them, there were more. I began to see groups of crocodiles basking, and nobody was even looking at them. So as I counted the crocodiles on the bank, and then I started looking in the water with a pair of binoculars, and under all those lotus blossoms and leaves were these little heads that were swimming around, crocodile heads. And the forest department does its best. It puts up these signboards warning people of using the water when there are crocodiles there. And that's from another village, and that's another village. So it's you can put up signboards, but if people are dependent on the water, they're going to go and use it no matter what. So the forest department then took that idea from Sri Lanka and made an enclosure for people to use the water. So the idea is the area of water within that enclosure, closer to the bank, is where you would use the water, where you could do your stuff, and the rest of the pond behind that lineup of mesh nets is for crocodiles. But a lot of those panels are missing. Any crocodile swimming by can come and grab an arm or a leg, and it's not as if the women are quiet, they're chatting, their bangles are jangling, and they're not even paying attention to the crocodiles that are swimming by. They are so busy doing their work, and the crocodiles aren't doing anything either. So a really, really interesting situation that, they didn't think it necessary to repair that mesh enclosure and be safe from crocodiles. And I thought, I wouldn't trust captive crocodiles and the Madras Crocodile Bank, where they've known people all their lives, they've dealt with people all their lives, but I wouldn't, put my arm in front of a crocodile there. How is it that these people here are so comfortable with crocodiles? And as I was, figuring it out, Anirudh pointed to a vacant lot behind me. There were like, bunches of rubble lying there with creepers growing all over. Apparently a house had been there at one time, and the crocodiles had built dug tunnels, burrows underneath the embankment, and undermined the structure of the house, so the house fell down. And I thought, oh God, did somebody get hurt? Nobody was at home. There were no crocodiles in the tunnel at the time, so nobody was hurt. And I thought, okay, if you lose a whole house, that's quite a financial setback. People aren't going to keep quiet about it. But the lady who lived in the house next door, she was so amused, and she thought it was very funny that we were so interested in this. And yeah, the house fell down. That's what crocodiles do. And we made our way out of this strange village, as far as I thought. And out on the road, Anirudh points out to two potholes on the road. It was like any other village road, a few potholes in bad shape. I mean, what's so different about this? I couldn't understand what he was saying. What he was saying was there were crocodile tunnels on either side of the road, and the tunnels were undermining the road. And if nobody did anything about it, the road was going to go the same way as the house. And it's not as if that people are also making use of crocodile burrows. So Anirudh was saying that when he went out at night to count crocodiles. So that's what, like I said earlier, hunters find crocodiles easily by sweeping the torchlight across the water. Now crocodile conservationists use the same technique to count crocodiles, to keep a tab on how many there are and whether the numbers are going up or down. So, and that's the best way to count crocodiles, because during the day they're just hidden by bushes. You might miss a few, so you don't get a good sense of how many crocodiles there are. Most things with crocodiles happen at night. So Anirudh was doing this night survey with a light, and he came upon a burrow, and he looked inside thinking there might be a crocodile. But it wasn't a pair of crocodile eyes looking back at him. It was something else. So he put his hand in and pulled out this cardboard box filled with bottles. It was like the local bootlegger had stashed his lot of booze, hooch, thinking that nobody would dare look inside a crocodile burrow. So I was thinking, what kind of strange people are these? Don't they watch television? Don't they see Animal Planet? Don't they see all these crocodiles, attacking people in Africa and Australia and other places? Okay, forget that. Don't they hear about Vadodara? It's just, I think 40 kilometers away. So how come they continue to be so casual with their crocodiles? So that wasn't the end of the story. So we then meet the village headman, and he talks about building another pond in the village to make more space for crocodiles. And I was thinking, you can improve habitat in a sanctuary. That sounds reasonable. But doing it in a village surrounded by people investing labor, time, money, and land in creating this habitat for crocodiles has got to be like completely bonkers. But if you, and I mean, I've been struggling for many years to define what a conservationist is. And I think every single villager in these parts is like a crocodile conservationist. Malataj actually calls itself uh, Magar Mitra Gang. I think it translates either as village of croc friends or croc friendly village or something like that. And the villagers are savvy enough that the crocodiles are now part of their branding, that even though they don't have the most number of crocodiles in that region, that rank belongs to another village called Deva, which is 5 kilometers north of Malataj, where they have nearly 90 mugger crocodiles. I'm just going to show you some images of that. Okay. So that's a drone shot of an island within the pond where you can see all these crocodiles basking, and there's plenty more of them. So now you can see the view of that island with the village all around, essentially. So in all those villages, people live literally cheek by jowl with crocodiles. And one incident brings that home to me. We went to this elderly resident's house and he took us to his backyard, and it didn't have a fence or a hedge or even a wall or anything like that. There was a dry ditch which led to a canal which drained into that pond that you just saw. And he pointed to a burrow right in his backyard. And a few years ago, apparently a crocodile had come up into his backyard, dug itself a tunnel. And at that time when I was visiting, it was empty because the pond was full and it didn't need to use it. But every summer it hikes up to this guy's backyard and spends the next few months hanging out in this tunnel. And the man was completely casual about this reptile living in his backyard. And I know of no other place in the world where people live like that close to crocodiles. And there's another incident. So I thought, okay, fine, it's just outside the house, so he didn't really have to mess with it. So one crocodile snuck into someone's house when nobody was looking and went to sleep under the bed. And when Anirudh's office got the phone call about it, the guy couldn't control his laughter. He said that his entire family went to sleep on the bed all night long. They didn't know there was a crocodile underneath, and they found out only the next morning. And he wasn't freaked out at all. He was totally in splits about it. And in almost every case where there are crocodiles in ponds, fishermen have a problem with crocodiles because they see crocodiles as being competition. They are eating fish, which the fishermen want, and they complain about crocodiles reducing the number that they catch, basically. But in Charotar, the contract for fishing goes out. So the fishermen come from other areas, and even they are considerate towards muggers. I don't know how true this is. They say they go out and anchor their boat in the middle of the pond as a signal to all the mugger crocodiles, hey guys, we're coming tomorrow to catch fish, so please stay out of the way. And apparently, according to the fishermen, the mugger do stay out of the way. Sometimes they do get caught in the nets, and the fishermen just haul them out by the tails and release them unharmed into the pond. Occasionally, if there are large crocodiles, they tie them up on the bank while they are fishing, so there's no interference, and then they let the crocodiles go. It may not be the best fishing practice, but you've got to hand it to the fishermen. They have the best interest of the crocodiles at heart, where, like I said, elsewhere, they see them as competition and are not very tolerant of them. So you might ask, okay, so if people and crocodiles are living so close to each other, do accidents happen? So over a 5-year period, 3 people were injured and 1 9-year-old girl did die. She got killed by a crocodile. But the interesting thing, or the touching thing about it, is that her father doesn't blame the crocodile. He's in fact one of the champions of crocodile conservation in that area, and he goes around giving talks to village people, other villagers, about why crocodiles need to be protected and all the do's and don'ts of living with crocodiles, so nobody else becomes a victim. So I thought, living with crocodiles has this takes it to another level. There is some sort of unspoken bond between these humans and crocodiles, and I couldn't understand what it was. And throughout that area, everywhere we went, we saw these in the doorways. This little image of a goddess, and she's called Kodiyarma. I'm sure a lot of you, if you're from Gujarat, you would know this goddess. And so she looks, beautiful. And the crocodile looks menacing with its mouth open like that. But it has a little nose ring and it has anklets, and it looks too cute almost to be true. If only real crocodiles were like that. So maybe this was the role model for the people there. They aspire to be like the deity they worship. According to the folklore, Kodiyama is supposed to have told crocodiles not to harm people in the area. And whether she said it or not, the people really believe she has blessed the crocodiles and them. So they completely trust her protection and the crocodiles. So before, religion is an interesting thing. It doesn't work everywhere all the time. So we worship elephants, snakes, monkeys, we as avatars of various gods. But when there is loss of property, loss of livelihood, loss of animals or crops, or injuries to humans, or death, there is tremendous hostility. You will see animals being poisoned, you will see them being clobbered to death, and you will see people harassing them. So religion it can't be the one answer to everything. And it's even more intriguing because Vadodara is not all that far off. It's the same people, same culture, same language, same practices, and yet you have these two completely different situations. So one of the things people say is that everything will be hunky-dory as long as the numbers of people and crocodile doesn't increase, because the moment there is an increase in numbers, you need more resources, which puts pressure on the other. Now, the Voluntary Nature Conservancy has done annual surveys, I think for 7-8 years now, and every single year they've counted more crocodiles. In January this year, they counted more than 200 crocodiles in these villages. So, and I just wanted to show an image. Okay, so that's them doing a survey, and they also ask people about what they think of crocodiles and why they like them, things like that. So one of the things people said was they think crocodiles were beautiful. So I don't know how many people in the world would say that, but it was mostly men, I think, if I remember right. And the women thought they were ugly, and I guess I wasn't all that different. So anyway, so there were all these crocodile numbers are increasing, and the density of people there is about 600 per square kilometer. It's a fairly densely populated area. And I don't know of any recent census figures there which compares to previous years, but I would think with the fertility of the soil and the productivity of that area, it's very unlikely that you're going to see a decline in population. Some others say it's if there is a space crunch, then there might be conflict. But come on, every day people are walking and wading into the water and doing that thing. They are intruding into crocodile habitat. And also you've got to consider this thing between fishermen and crocodiles. They don't see each other as competition. And if you take any other village, anywhere else, and if one crocodile shows up in that pond, I can tell you people are going to be petitioning the authorities saying, come and remove this ASAP. I can't imagine them willing to live with this crocodile no matter what, to the degree that these people are living. And there are like 90 crocodiles, 100 crocodiles in one pond. Malataj, I think, has about 25 of them. And so what does it come down to? Is it religion? Or it seems to be that people genuinely do like crocodiles. But I also wonder, what is it about the crocodiles? Why are they so different? It's almost as if they're a different species than the ones in Vadodara. Why is it that the crocodiles in Charotar are giving such a wide berth to humans? And one thing that occurs to me is that people are so relaxed about crocodiles. You know, they see them every day. It's no big deal. They don't mess with them. They don't interfere with the crocodiles. And the crocodiles seem to know that. So they just accept people as part of the landscape. And, you know, just as they would avoid a tree or a bush or something, they just avoid people and continue to live their lives. But if you've grown up all your life, or if your worldview is what you see in the news, which is constant human wildlife banging heads against each other, killing and conflict, and or you read man-eating stories by Jim Corbett, and if you assume that is the normal, then you look at situations like this and say, man, this is so abnormal. This is not right. Something's really wrong. These people are weird. These crocodiles are weird. But let me switch it. What if this is the normal? And if the way, you know, people have been harassing animals has made them hypersensitive or even neurotic, that they just viscerally react. And I'm saying not just animals being neurotic, people too. So maybe there is something there. The thing is, we don't really know what is it that's making things work. And I think this kind of living with dangerous animals this might be a mechanism, like a survival mechanism that's very ancient, and we've lost it over the years in the rest of India. The thing about living with these dangerous animals is you're also accepting risk. Like I said, the accidents do happen, but people don't seem to go overboard with it. They seem to have some sort of worldview where crocodiles have a place, and they seem to adjust their lives around it. So I would say that coexistence with animals, it doesn't mean that people don't suffer loss. They do. They lose livestock, they get hurt, they can get killed. But it depends on whether people are willing to take on that risk and what makes them take on that risk. It's got nothing to do with numbers, now population increase or amount of space or lack of fear. Here are crocodiles just giving people a wide berth. I don't understand this whole business of what makes people confrontational with animals now after seeing this situation. But the tragedy is we have data on how many people are getting killed or injured, how many crocodiles are being killed. We are so besotted with numbers. We do not have a clue what makes this situation work. What are the factors that helps people and crocodiles get along well with each other? And I have a feeling that Charotar is probably a singular place in the world to show how you can live with crocodiles, because everywhere else they're demanding crocodiles be removed. It may not work in every situation with every species, maybe, I don't know. But, mugger crocodile are not Bambis. They have a reputation as being, attacking people. So it's very hard to tell how to do this. Let me end with one interesting anecdote or a funny anecdote. So I thought these, villagers who are fearless of crocodiles were hardcore people. They just didn't fear anything at all. But there was something that they were terrified of, and Anirudh and his team had an encounter and survived. They were doing one of those night surveys I told you about. So they were in this pond and shining a light around the pond to count crocodiles. And this creature came out of the water and started charging at them. And everyone ran for their lives, and notebooks were flying and pens were dropped and all that. So after they went a distance, they stopped to catch their breath. It wasn't a crocodile that chased them, it was a water buffalo. And it's so ironic because the one animal, for people who are living with wild animals, the one animal that they were afraid of was a domestic beast. So thank you very much. I just wanted to say thank you to a bunch of people who loaned me their images for use in this talk, because I'm not a great photographer. Thank you very much for having me and for listening to the talk. Do you have any questions?
Hey, Janaki, thank you for some memorable anecdotes, stories of coexistence, and also just I definitely won't forget casual with crocodiles soon. That term, that line, and crocodiles are beautiful. Something also to remember. I have a few questions, and then maybe we can. There are also some from the audience, and just for those of us who don't know about the Crocodile Bank, could you tell us a bit about Crocodile Bank, because you've kind of spoken about it a lot through your talk. So maybe just if you can tell us a few words on that.
Okay, so in the 1970s, when I told you about how crocodiles were having a really hard time, and Project Crocodile was initiated. At the same time, my husband, Rom Whitaker, he did one of the first surveys of crocodiles in the country and was saying, oh, there are only 200 gharial left in the entire world, and salties are hammered out of existence, and muggers are virtually non-existent. So he set up a captive rearing facility for crocodiles called the Madras Crocodile Bank. It's south of Chennai along the coast. And the reason it's called a bank is at that time, they didn't know how easy it was to breed crocodiles. And the idea was to have every species of crocodile at the bank breeding. So there would be a gene pool of all the world's crocodilian species, alligators, crocodiles, and caimans. So it's now a reptile zoo that visitors visit when there is no lockdown. And it not only has crocodiles, but it has some snakes, lizards, turtles, and other reptiles. So it's a zoo basically, but it also does conservation.
Thank you. Could you also tell us about the city girl and how and when she became feral, as in how and when did you come to be interested in animals? And you've written on the subject of animals and conservation for a really long time now. So can you take us a bit through the journey somehow?
Okay, very briefly, my interest in animals began with my husband. So before that, I used to be a filmmaker, and Rom was the conservationist who is always looking for ways and means to get the message out. So he thought, okay, giving talks in schools and colleges, you can reach about 40 to 100 people at a time. But if I were to make a film and show it on television, I can reach a few million. So he became a filmmaker, and we met during the course of our mutual careers, essentially as filmmakers. So we then I think we had a common filmmaker friend who worked on the same project with me, and then she went to work with Rom, and then we got introduced, and that's how I met Rom, and we got together, and I lived in the Crock Bank for a few years, and I guess it kind of grows on you.
You've spoken about the crocodiles at Charotar and the kind of the remarkable way in which they coexist with the people in the village. I was wondering if we can perhaps take like this opportunity to speculate or a bit about why this might be the case. And I just want to maybe put forward maybe one speculation and then maybe you can kind of like roll the ball a bit further. I was wondering how much of this has to do with language. That there is a kind of language of fear and loathing and distrust, and not just like in relation to crocodiles. Like in a city like Bombay, you go out and I have a dog, and so there will be some parents who, when they see your dog, they'll they alert their kids like like you're with a monster or something, and so there is a language, and I'm using the word language in a very broad way. So even with crocodiles, for instance, right, there is a language, and when I was thinking on the subject, I realized crocodile tears, for instance, right, it's so much part of our vocabulary. It suggests automatically a sense of sort of distrust, right? You're distrusting someone who is possibly faking grief and emotions. But then what one forgets is that the same crocodile tears are kind of ecosystem, right? It's an ecosystem on which butterflies and bees are known to feed. So I was thinking about, so maybe if you can, what do you think firstly about this idea of this language of distrust, perhaps, which creates this hostility or animosity, and also maybe some speculations of your own as to why this is happening in Charotar.
It's difficult for me because I don't speak Gujarati, so I don't know how the people talk about crocodiles. But the degree of awareness is just something else. Like I'm watching crocodiles or looking for crocodiles and I'm not seeing them. And this lady comes out of the house and she says, oh, they'll come out at 11 o'clock. It's just part of her everyday scene. She knows what time they come out. She said, come out. If you come back at 11 o'clock, you'll see them all in that particular, like she was pointing in a particular bank, and she says, 4 or 5 of them will be there. So it's possible. I mean, it's not just crocodile tears. The other thing we run up against with snakes is speak with forked tongue, or the snake. Things like that. Yeah, but even the very name of the crocodile, like mugger crocodile,
sure, exactly,
insinuates that it's really violent. It wants to rob you of what belongs to you. I don't know. I've debated it. I really can't come to any conclusion. Like, there are friends of mine who protest that you shouldn't use language like that. You shouldn't demonize animals. But you have Aesop fables, for instance, where the donkey is always dull, the fox is always smart. We have it in us. We are storytellers. We want to create these characters. If you had everyone being uniformly good, you don't have a story, I suppose. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. I haven't figured this out. Maybe more than language itself, I think it's just the ability to make space for something else that's non-human in your world, whatever you may want to call it. I think that magnanimity is what we need in this world.
Yes. Are there any other, to your mind, I mean, outside of crocodiles, are there any other sort of instances of such sort of peaceful coexistence in the country that we know of, or elsewhere as well?
So every time I go, okay, I name a species and say, well, I can't imagine anyone living with that species. I've got to see it. So I think the species that really opened my eyes was leopard. So until then, I always thought, a big scary cat with, fangs and claws, it's just bad news for people. And they tend to live in sugarcane fields, and people didn't, even experts were saying lack of prey. So there was a time when there was leopard attacks in Bombay, and they were releasing rabbits inside Sanjay Gandhi National Park because there was lack of prey because leopards were killing people. But it turned out to be complete because bad management. They were taking, like, every time someone saw a leopard somewhere, they were catching that leopard and putting it somewhere else where they thought it should belong. But the leopard isn't from there, and they are like cats and dogs. They have a very defined territory. And you hear of these stories of domestic cats that were taken to some new place, and they said, well, I don't like this place, and walking hundreds of kilometers sometimes back home. So leopards do that. And if you leave them alone, there are leopards everywhere in this country. And like where we live the other day, we got a camera trap of it. It's completely village area around here. And we have a leopard here. So they're living here. It's just some people know, and it's just part of their life, their world. So there are black buck. You think, okay, black buck in an agricultural area eating up crops is going to be a big problem. But there are parts of Orissa where farmers live with black buck. And, it just goes on. It's just amazing when you see these horrible videos of people burning bears or beating some poor animal, you think humans are evil. But I think what goes unnoticed completely is this whole culture of living with these creatures that we are not celebrating, we are not analyzing, we are not propagating to solve this problem. We're completely clueless about how to solve it. So I thought, okay, fine, I can see how leopards live with people. I can see how black buck live with people. I can't see how crocodiles live with people until I saw Charotar. Now I'm saying, okay, show me a place where elephants live with people. So I haven't found that yet, but I'm sure there are. It's just people don't complain, so you don't hear about it. You have to go and find them.
Yeah. One of the things that I found really nice is this idea of crocodiles are beautiful, right? Because one aspect of this ongoing sort of tension is that, if an animal is cute, there is that kind of hierarchy, right, of cute to the animals and then the reptiles and the snakes. So there is a kind of sense of what is beautiful, right? And that comes into play. I have there are some questions from the audience. I still have a few, but okay. So there's one that's come in that says the anecdote you shared about the male and the female mother parenting was really fascinating. Can you share any other incidents that highlight the nature of muggers? Also, I wanted to just ask, because we were talking about language, the mugger, the word mugger, that's a colonial invention? Yeah.
Borrowed from Hindi, magarmach.
Borrowed from Hindi, right?
Crocodile.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's not originally English. So, mugger are probably one of the, I don't know how many others. They have 2 seasons. They lay 2 sets of eggs a year, which is probably the reason why the father is also participating in doing the parenting. Because if the female had to look after one clutch of eggs and the babies that hatch out of it, she's spending months at it. And if she were to lay another bunch of eggs soon afterwards, she would be completely, wiped out. So I think the whole parental I mean, the paternal help in parenting comes from that, because they're laying 2 clutches of eggs in a season. So what else do they do? Well, I'm still learning to find them beautiful. Yeah, and digging burrows is a big thing. I mean, they'll walk, like in Gir, for instance, if you go to Sasangir, there's that big dam. That whole embankment is riddled with burrows of crocodiles. Sometimes you wonder, it's like a wall. You wonder how they climb up. It's like a sheer rock face. They're climbing up and digging a hole. You don't think they're capable of it, but there they are. I mean, I can't think. I mean, they probably do a whole bunch more. I can't think of anything right now.
I have another question. While the crocodile tunnels exist besides the roads and humans, and crocodiles have been coexisting, but is this habitat suitable for crocodiles to live? Okay, yeah.
Who am I to say what is suitable? The crocodiles are saying it's suitable. They are, they are living, they're surviving, they're looking good, they are laying eggs, they're having their babies. So it's got to be suitable, I suppose.
For sure.
I suppose I think the question is it suitable with all those people around? If you interpreted the question that way, I assume so, because the people are welcoming crocodiles in their lives and in their villages and in their spaces. So I think that's the way conservation should be, because if we are going to say only crocodile, I mean, all wildlife should live only in forests. We have such few forests. We are done, there is no conservation hope at all if you're going to bank on those few parcels of land for all of India's wildlife. So anything else?
Yes, maybe one last question before we go.
Sure.
I was in your time, I mean, not just crocodiles, but I've been thinking about what one can somehow learn from animals. And I wanted to, and I've been thinking more about this recently, because there is, for instance, among animals, this self-medicating behavior, right, where they eat plants, soil, insects to kind of treat themselves and prevent diseases. And so it's a kind of like an embodied knowledge system that they carry, which it feels like we may have lost touch with in regard to our own lives. And so this is something that I kind of look at animals when I'm thinking of what possibly I could learn from them. But what I wanted to ask you about, what life lessons have you learned from animals? I mean, crocodiles and otherwise along the way,
I'm thinking, I don't know about life lessons.
But there are so many in your book itself. I mean, and they can be, of course, these are somehow, or not life lessons necessarily, but also playful. For instance, seahorses as fathers. They are the only ones who have who carry their babies.
I think the fundamental thing is that humans think too much of ourselves, that we are at the top of the pyramid. I think a lot of people have that sense that the world was created for us to exploit. And there are a lot of creatures out there living on the margins of our existence, so to say, that do amazing things, that they do better than us even. Like, like a crocodile's sense of smell, and they have this, every scale on a crocodile's face has this particular kind of sense organ. It's called some integumentary sense organ, ISO it's called, and it's this electromagnetic thing that appears to sense water currents and things like that. When we don't really understand it, they have this like it's super sensitive in the sense that we feel the world with our fingertips. They seem to feel it without even that kind of touch, with the water flowing over their face, they seem to be able to get a lot of information. And yeah, like seahorses, like, you know, taking fatherhood to the extreme, becoming pregnant instead of the females. And, you know, then there are wild dogs, African wild dogs that vote. So they decide whether to go hunting or continue lazing in the shade, and they take a vote apparently. And it's not exactly democratic because different members in the hierarchy have slightly weightier votes, like the ones higher in the hierarchy. That
sounds familiar.
Yeah, it does. Okay, so and then what else? And yeah, I mean, octopus are pretty interesting and crazy creatures that mimic so many other creatures in the ocean, and they escape from aquarium and they do all these funky things. I think they make our world richer. I mean, if there were no animals in our world, I just think we'd be so, I don't know what kind of horrible world that would be.
Yeah, I guess. And we would also, I mean, if there were no animals, perhaps that would also mean that we wouldn't exist, because we are also animals ourselves, part of the same ecosystem. Janaki, thank you so much. That was a really fantastic and revealing talk. And lots to think about in terms of how to coexist, how do we move forward. And yeah, thank you for being with us this evening. And I'd also like to thank everyone who's joined us for this session, and to tell you that we will be back on Sunday with another session, and this the second happening that's part of episode 5, which is going to be a conversation with Ghulam Mohammed Sheikh. Do join us for that. Okay. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Gitanjali.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Gitanjali has also summarized everything, but I just want to add that we will also be sharing the recording of this session soon on our website. And in case you would want to share it with your friends, please feel free to share the video with them. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you on Sunday.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Good night.